Okay, welcome to our workshop on the media production Hive. So I'm Yonti Friesen, Columbia College Chicago, and we're gonna go over this model that has been years in making, and it's based on my experience as a high school teacher, but also working with a lot of educators who are doing media with students, and eventually in the last 15 years being a scholar and researching and doing research and ethnographical research and interviews and observations and all of that. So I took all of that together and put it in a theoretical practical model of how to teach media that is civically engaged. So that's the overview of what we're going to talk about. So to start, what I want you to do is, when I do it in person, I actually have tons of minifigures of Lego here because we're online. I'm gonna show you those ones, kind of, and each one of you can just choose either because you like it, and you can see my addiction to Disney Plus because everything is either Star Wars, Disney, or Marvel. So that's my bias franchise kind of thing. Um, so you either choose a character because you know the character, because it looks cute, whatever, doesn't matter. So you can write in the chat or unmute yourself, and because we're a small group, you can tell me which one of the minifigures you like and why did you choose this minifigure. Okay, so Chewy. Why Chewy?
I like the character, and that's also my cat's name. So,
Ah, well, so you need to choose Chewy, of course.
yep.
But the name of the cat is Chewy or Chewbacca?
Chewbacca is his full name.
Okay,
Chewie for short.
okay. But to which one the cat actually reacts? That's the important thing.
Chewie.
Okay, so okay, good. Uh, Kira, which one? Yeah, but which one of the reason driven? So, do you like Doctor Strange, Yoda, or EO? Like, is there any?
Yeah, Eeyore.
EO. Okay, sounds good. And Midwa, Darth Vader, yes.
Uh, Mostly because I just like his deep voice. But from a visual standpoint, like I think the mask is just what draws me in. The mask and
Oh
his
yeah.
voice. Yeah.
I mean, again, brilliant kind of like way of doing like the ultimate villain, right? Um, okay,
I
Franz.
like Tiger. I don't know how to say his name in
Tiger.
English.
Yeah, Tiger. Yep.
Tiger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just from like the visuals, the orange color,
that's fine.
color driven.
And again, I mean, there is a whole theory about the reason driven, people driven, detail driven, action driven, like personality. This is like a dumbed down kind of Meyer Briggs kind of that has 16, which again, it's not really scientifical, but people are using it. This is even less scientifical, but you could, in general, divide people into four groups of like what is the most important value. So again, I'm using the characters, but you can see you need to create this group dynamic, which you've experienced already, like with me doing those group dynamics, and that helps. What I want us to do is, as you think about the character, not just what the character represent, but also the, like, is it people driven, reason driven, detail driven, or action driven? I want you to think about yourself as a media educator. What are your strengths? Like, what are your superpowers, or what are you bringing, you as an educator, when you come to the workshop you're going to give? So, we always like to position ourselves and saying, this is me. I'm not coming to save you. I'm coming to work with you. But you kind of come clean and explain to the people who are your learners where you're coming from. So when you present yourself, what are your strengths? We'll do the whole SWOT analysis of yourself, but what you can either write in the chat or you can, yeah.
Also, we're like doing it now.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, wait, I need to think for like a
Okay.
second.
So the whole idea is I'm getting you in like slowly into it, and that's why this workshop usually takes like 3 days, um, because it's really thinking deeply about where you're coming as an educator and what are your goals, because that's you'll need to model basically to the people you're working with how they need to be thoughtful also from where they're coming from. So the same exercise I'm doing with you, you can do with the people you're working. You don't need to use Lego. That's my addiction, as you know. You can use magazine. You can use like whatever, you know. Okay, so Kara, you're talking professionally, kind of like you know how to do the work. So you're an expert, media maker, and people can rely on your expertise as a media maker. Midway, you're talking about creativity and determination. Good. Yeah. So kind of as a way, would that be the same as Kara? Like you know the professional process of like how to make a video, and you know like how difficult it is and how tenacious you need to actually go through it. Okay.
I would say one of my strengths is to think creatively about things and find different angles and connecting with people and finding common ground.
Okay. Great. So like, you know, basically facilitating. Awesome. That's super important. Okay, Jordan. So the media making, but also the marketing, advertising, like part of it, the distribution that we'll talk about. So that's awesome as well. Okay, so you're coming to teach media or to work with people on media. You're bringing those strengths, but at the same time, before we go there, so there is research that I love to use about the motivation of the teachers, and it's really interesting. This research figure out 12 different motivations. Did I go 12? No, I think I'm missing one. Okay. Can you see in the screen the whole 12? And it's really interesting because those 12 motivations have been validated with several research to be really the core reasons why people want to teach other people to make media or to analyze media, which is super interesting. And why is it so interesting? Because it shows what are the core values. Now, there is a questionnaire, if you want to try to test yourself, 48 questions that will tell you at the end what is your main motivation, what is your secondary motivation, and kind of what is the cluster of motivations. The website is setyourmotivation.com, and then you can do this questionnaire if you're really curious about. But the way I like to do it is actually ask you. And so what's interesting, if you look here, you can see that are you focusing on the tools? That's what interests you technically to teach people. And then you either are professional or techie. Are you really looking at content and quality? And then you're interested in taste making or to be like the professor who's like teaching that. On community connection, are you an activist or are you a teacher 2.0? Text and audiences, are you interested in alternatives, narratives, or on trend setting? Are you interested in media systems? Are you like a watchdog or demystifier to explain how the thing works? Or are you learner center focused? Are you more a spirit guide or a motivator? So it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just where are you with your core values? Which one? Usually we say pick 2 or 3 that are the core ones, that's why you're teaching media. Like for me, I know that I'm definitely looking at motivation and activist. Those are the 2 core for me. And the things are changing. Like every year it changes a little bit and switch. I started with being very focused on the tools, but then I moved to more about the motivation of the learners and about being activist and making social change. Obviously, with civic media, right? It makes sense. So you can, if you want, you can write in the chat which ones. We're not gonna, stay on that. But what I'm saying is, when you're coming to work with a community to give a workshop, it's very important that you come clean and explains what is your motivation, because the people who are coming to work with you might not have the same motivations. And if you don't do expectation, and that's why, I'm not getting to the technicality yet, I'm giving you all this overview for so long, because it's crucial. And that can really like create tension later on, because you want them to be activist, but they want to be professional. And you're like, okay, so the cut is not perfect, the video is not perfect, that's fine, but it's more important that you'll do a social impact. And they're like, who cares about the social impact? Like, I want to do the perfect movie. And then you start to have conflicts. So that's where all this activity, Lego, no Lego, or like, SWOT analysis, but expectations, and for you to use those tools that I'm sharing with you of why you're doing this is super important, because you're sharing where you're coming from and people can know, okay, so that's what interests them. It's not really where I'm coming from, but like, okay, fine, like I can choose either to be or not. Like they can bail out. But you don't want like a month into it start to have conflicts and not understanding where it comes from. So that's why it's so crucial to have those things. I see you're nodding, so I guess you make sense and you're agreeing. Any questions about this, about how to do that in a group? You could give them the questionnaire if you want, but you could also just share with them this and ask them. And I can give you handouts of this if you want to.
No, I just think that's helpful when you have multiple people teaching together, like sharing this with the other educators and just understanding like what outcomes we all envision for the program. So, yeah.
Especially when you're co-teaching, that's super important, because usually you won't have the same values. So at least to acknowledge that that's where you're coming from, that's where I come from, that's fine. And we understand each one where we're putting the focus on.
I was going to ask, obviously this is like very specific to media education, but do you think something similar should be like used in, let's say like in my project, like the storytelling workshop, if I was to do it with other people?
You're not using media?
Well, I am, but like if it's not seen as like a formal.
What is formal?
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay, you know what? That's a great question. Let's define, because I didn't do that, and that's a good point. What is media education?
I think for me, it's like all instructional education. How can I define it without using education? So like instructional resources to teach people how to use or consume or create media.
Okay. By the way, this is a very tricky question. People that are expert in the fields have been fighting over that for 40 years. So I'm just, just saying. There have been global meetings every 2 years and they're still fighting over the definition. So whatever I say, it's not the right answer. People have different perspective. But in general, the shortest version is teaching about or and with media. Now, media is very broad. Media can be a mural, can be a book, can be a song, can be so many things, can be a video games. So I can just come and show you a picture or show you a poem. That would be media education. You don't create the poem, but we're analyzing it. But I can also come and teach you how to create a poem, and that would be like media education as well. The part of the problem is that people think that media is video, but no, it's mediated communication, meaning anything that is not face-to-face communication. So it's almost everything. right, that you're like teaching with and using. So your workshop about storytelling, Francia, unless it's people who are meeting with other people face to face and telling them story, that would be face to face. But most likely they're going to write something, they're going to create something. Then it's media education. So that applies to all of that. And that's part of the problem of media education, because media education is not a field by itself. I mean, there's more and more people who are part of it, but it can be part of so many other disciplines as well. So that's when it's tricky. There's not department of media education. There's other department of education, or there's departments of media and communication. So, okay. Any other question? Are we good? Okay. So, inspiration. What is your inspiration to do the workshops that you want to do? Like, when you're coming to teach that course that you're going to teach, what are you going to show the people that is your inspiration to actually do that? What examples are you going to show and say, that was my inspiration to come and work with you?
Could like a collection or like a video or a song or like a, what is it called? Like the image boards with different things that inspire you.
You know, a children's book, a children's TV series, a song, you know, whatever, inspiration, an experience you had in second grade. I don't know, like whatever inspired you to do the. Okay, so let's see, Kira. Okay, so you're looking from a deficit of not having that. But do you have an example? What I'm asking, and that would be a challenge, we'll get there. But do you have an example of how it looks like when it's good? Like, what is the thing that you want to do? So here we're not asking about deficit. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I found a podcast produced by a high school in Illinois in Springfield, where like they have all the resources to like create a podcast and are guided to like create a podcast about various issues. And I feel like that's the inspiration almost of like
That's great.
having a space where students can have those resources and the mentorship to create meaningful media. So I guess that would be the like ideal model.
Can you put it in the chat?
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it.
I would love to, you know, part of what we're doing with the Media Literacy Coalition in Illinois. So that would be great to show what they're doing. Awesome. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you saw a good example, an inspiring example of, yes, that's how it should look like. So Jordan, Francia, Midwa.
I have a book that it's called Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed, and it's a collection of essays from the Latino community. They were all written by different authors, and it kind of shines a light on the various origins and skin colors that make up the Latino community. So it's like diverse. There's poems, there's stories, there's like odes, there's all sorts of expression, and it's just highlighting diversity and richness. So that's one of my examples.
Wow. So it's a book or it's a website?
I'll share the link
to
the book.
Yeah, wow. Sounds awesome. Jordan, for me, I think discovering Black Shop Friday itself, the photography that was used, other form of media. Okay. So, but Jordan, you want to do the videos and you're going to come to owners of businesses in Austin. What kind of type of inspiration you look for the videos? Like what type of videos you have as an example to say, oh, it should be that kind of video. And that you can also show them to inspire them, to tell them that's what we're aiming for.
I guess for me, I would say this filmmaker from Kenya. Her name is Judy Kibinge. She has a platform known as My Docu Box. Basically, it supports like character-driven storytelling and encourages like new forms of documentary storytelling, especially among young people. So I think that to me would be my inspiration.
So you know what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
Put the link. I'm curious. So again, that's great. So you see how each one of you are bringing from your experience and from your research things that can help others to like look and see what you're doing. Okay, great, Jordan. So have those to share. It's like kind of like a marketing kit for the people you're going to work with to tell them, here, this is how it's going to look like. So all those examples of the YouTuber and the shoppable video of Google and those things. So thank you, Midwa, for putting it. Okay, good. So this is a quote that I usually share because when I did my dissertation, I got that quote, and I mean, it got me angry, but not so much because I was much angrier when I heard the same text when I was a teacher 10 years before in Israel. So this is a current pattern that I know that usually people who haven't experienced media education with youth are bringing and saying, yeah, okay, your thing, go to your like class and do your kind of thing, but you know, when really we need to teach the kids, like let them learn math and grammar and stuff, but your thing is, you know, is just to keep them occupied. And this is really annoying for me. Like, this is something that I'm been fighting for like 20 years to show that when you do media education well, and again, I'm going to show the model, you get to really deep learning and you learn a lot of different skills that are beyond just the goal of making media. So that's, you know, I'm putting there, that has been like my deficit kind of inspiration in a way. And I've heard it so many times. So that's part of like my kind of advocacy work that I'm doing. And so that gets us to like the challenges, because it's all nice, but you're not going to have the optimal like tools, right? So can you start to identify what are going to be the challenges you're going to face? And there's many challenges: time, budget, skills, motivation, there's, you know, name it. But I want you to think at this point, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge you're going to face as you giving your workshop? Commitment, yes. And that's part of like where the beginning needs to be clear. And you know, it's an American thing of giving a stipend for students to come so that they don't go to McDonald's because they can earn money, you know, there, then waste their time. Like, so I don't know. I don't like that money is a motivation, but I do understand that it works that way. I know I was pretty shocked when I came to the US, understanding that that's how things works. So money definitely works, but it's not enough. Like just paying won't be enough. They need to really be committed. And part of the work that I'm doing with you now is doing that in the beginning, like meeting expectation, giving them agency, and I'll explain more how you give them more agency. But it's, yes, that's one of the biggest one, especially now with pandemic. The people lost. So I think Francia and Jordan, you're doing it with adults, but I think Kira and Midwa, you're doing it with youth kids. And so kids lost 2.5 years of emotional growth. So whatever the age you're with them, you need to think that emotionally they're like 3 years behind. And that's really problematic motivation. And for adults, everybody's burned out and kind of like cannot handle it anymore. So that's the burnout is real and it's a problem. And so you need even more than usual really focus on the motivation and make sure that people are with you, and don't expect you'll have 100% commitment from everybody. But at least if you have a core that comes, that's good enough. And that will make the glue. And Midwa, you're talking like here, or like what kind of experiences it was difficult to keep the kids motivated? Can you share a little bit?
Yeah, so like in the workshops that I've done with the children in Kenya, like 12 to 18 years old, it's been like keeping them motivated in terms of like, I mean, yeah, they get excited when they see the cameras. Actually, most of them just wanted to like, they were fascinated with how a camera looks like and, operating the camera, but giving them the motivation to actually tell stories and not just be excited about the equipment. That's what I mean.
Yeah. And I mean, for yourself also, even when you're writing something or an essay for a class, and the instructor gives you back with things like, great, you need to change this, and you're like, now I need to go back and start working on it. And so we'll get to that. I have an interesting take on that. You'll see. We'll get to that, so remind me. But yes, the cameras are always very attractive, but there is a lot of planning in the beginning and the editing at the end. That's where things, they need to kind of work more into it. Yeah. So the adaptability and accessibility for each one of the people, yeah, and that's where you need to use your listening and having feedback from them, and then you pivot. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. As long as you do those check marks, like during the workshop, exit tickets, for example. I always do anonymous exit tickets. So is everything online, Francia, or you're doing it in person?
It'll be in person.
So do you know index cards? Do you know how they look like?
Yes.
And we have in the office if you need some. So I just leave like on the table and tell people whenever you want, just write something, don't sign your name, make it anonymous, and just leave it on my table and I'll read it at the end of the day. And then, when I come the next time, I'm reading some of the stuff and addressing and saying, here's what I change. So people are motivated to give me feedback because they see that I actually do something with it.
Well, that's a good strategy. I actually have the first introductory workshop tomorrow, so I'll apply that.
Yeah, that's been very helpful. Again, not everybody will do it, but if they see that it does have impact, they'll be more motivated to give you more feedback on it. Yes, Jordan, different levels. So that's the issue is it's called differentiated instruction because everybody's in a different level. So if somebody's more advanced, they'll be bored that now you're talking to them about this while the others, and that can be tricky. So some of the times, if you see that there's some that, and I'm not sure, Jordan, in your case, are you going to do a workshop for several people? Or are you going to do it individually? Because individually, that solves the problem. But if you do it a collaborative, you might, part of the thing is make somebody like a teaching assistant, for example. Because if somebody is so advanced, then they can help you and they feel leadership kind of role. Here, they're helping because they have the knowledge. And then somebody else in editing, for example, will be that, So that's part of it. And if somebody is really, really like lagging behind, that's on you. If you want to spend more time with them and taking them out like of class or right after class and sitting with them and speed up kind of like, make sure that they're like on the same level with the others. But yeah, that's a challenge. And that's part of where the group work can help because each one can tap on their strength. instead of just feeling their weaknesses. Okay, good challenges. So we'll discuss all of this as I go through it. I think we went over this, but I want to emphasize this is a big thing, and that's part of the agency, Kira, that I was talking about. Usually students don't have control. Usually the teachers have control over everything, and that's where the students like their motivation is going down, because they're like, yeah, well, the teacher is doing whatever they want to do. So there are 4 parts. The content, who decide what is going to be the content, who decide who have access to the content, to the equipment. So Midwa, when you bring the cameras, can they check out the cameras? Can they hang out with the cameras longer? Or it's just each student have like 2 minutes to just play with the camera and then they need to give it to the next student? Like, how much accessible the cameras are for them, the computers, the computer lab, can they just go in and edit stuff? The format, who decides on the format? Usually it's the teacher, right? It's like, it's going to be a website, it's going to be a video, it's going to be a song, it's going to be a mural, it's going to be a video game. Like, you know, usually there's not like options for like, you do the medium you like to work in. And I think most of you are focusing on video in that sense. In your case, Jordan, you're convincing them that that's what's lacking in the Black Shop Friday, is that they don't have video, and video will have higher engagement. So like, they're buying into video will be a way to be helpful. So that works. Kira, I don't know in the studio there if there's options for podcast or other stuff, not just video. And Midwa, you made podcast because you followed with what they were doing anyway there. And I think Francia, you're a little bit more flexible, right? How the storytelling can be. And the last one is the distribution, which is, that's where, Jordan, you're bringing your expertise, and it's good for you to tell them about it. It's like, okay, who is going to share it? How it's going to be shared, right? So you did this podcast, awesome. But do the students have a say or not where it's going to be? Do they understand where it's going to be? And I'm not saying that you need 100% all of it to give to the students. Like Midwa, for example, you already agreed that the distribution will be on this platform. So that's done, okay? And they signing up for it. And Jordan, you also, the distribution is through Black Shop Friday, that is sponsored with Target, and with, like, they agree on that. So you don't need to feel pressure that everything needs to be 100%. There is, life and restriction and reality. Like, it's not, but you need to be open that can be an issue. If you're concerned about motivation, most likely it's going to be one of those things. Like, they don't have control over one of those things, and that's why they feel like, who cares? Like, so that's where I think Kira and Francia especially, because in Midwa's case and Jordan it's a little bit different, but Kira and Francia, you're doing like a workshop with the people that you want them to distribute their ideas. Do check-ins with them. Like, decide those things when you want. You don't need to check. It's overwhelming in the beginning if you say, okay, we're going to decide together about the content, format, distribution, and access. They'll be like, whoa, like this, like, what are you asking me? But as you go, once they did the content and they decided on the format and they understand the access, like, so have a discussion about distribution, have them be part of it, and that will increase motivation, agency, and they'll want to work along. This is very different in Jordan's case and in Midwa's case. Because Midwa, like Jordan, you're talking with them about a short, specific project. They just need to do this part. So they don't have control over the format, they don't have control over the distribution, and they don't have control of the access. They only have control of some of the content in your case. And that's the agreement you're making with them, which is totally fine. It's very different for Kira and Francia, because in their case, the students are coming and they want to be part of this exciting thing about telling the story, which encompasses all of that. Does that make sense? Okay. Support. What kind of support do you think you need to make it successful project?
It could be like financial support. It could be like having someone assist us during the workshop in case, something comes up or we have more helping hands. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, yeah, distribution like Midwest.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So again, Jeff will work with you on that kind of support from a mentoring. Like the class is really a mentoring class with him. So that's what he will work. Financial support is like grants, but at the same so Kira, you applied for the grants. Jordan, you basically are working with the platform that have some like funds. I'm not sure how much, but maybe also the always forget their name, the commerce, the network, but they might have some small budget. But Francia and Midwa, in your case, yes, that might be kind of problematic. It might be useful to break down, because a lot of the time I'm hearing educators saying, I don't have a budget. And I'm like, okay, what do you need? Like, if you narrow down to specific ask, that's easier than just saying, I need money. Because I need money is like, okay, $5 will help, or do you need 5 million? Like, what's the. But if you say, I need actually cameras, it's like, okay, but we do have cameras here. Just rent them for this amount. And it's not a financial support. I mean, it is in a way, but it's actually cameras that you need. So if you're able to break down, like, for example, Francia, if you need somebody to come and work with you, like, for example, there's an option to do an internship, and there can be a student that can do it as an internship for the summer, right? So when you break down what are the exact needs, like, for example, Kira and Jordan are in good place because Kira has this studio and has the two basically partners, right, that have those facilities. You have also the high school connection. And so you're getting the support. If you figure out what are the specific things you need, then you can, like, talk to them about it. And again, each one of you will have the mentoring of Jeff, like, during the summer. Jordan basically has the support of the commerce there, the networking association. Francia, I don't know if you have the support of the food equity group, and Midwa with U Media, and yeah. So it's very important to be specific in the support, because usually we're kind of into this mode of like, I don't have money, nobody cares, I don't, and then you just perpetuating kind of like self of desperation of like you're on your own. But like everything else, if you know how to what are your needs, and then you know how to ask it, then it might do the trick, and actually you will get the support that you need. So, and things change. It's not like you need to give a grocery shop list, like, and that's it. Every week it might change. But if you take 5 minutes a week to have like this document and work on it and see, that would be helpful when you give it to Jeff or other people that are you working with, to say, I actually need this. Do you have like a solution for that? And there might be creative solutions that are beyond just, here, get that money and figure it out. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so I'm sure you know this, right? This shouldn't be new to any of you. Either in your undergrad or you know it like professionally. This is media production. You brainstorm, there is pre-production of the planning, there is production, post-production to edit it, and then there is the broadcasting, distribution, whatever you would call it. Any questions about this part? Okay. As I said, this is just an example of the variety of media that we're talking about. And this is not even everything, but just to give you, this is, I think, some of it is digital media, but some of it is media. So just to make sure that we're on the same page with that. I'm gonna go now very fast because this is usually language for educators. Why to teach media? So this was from 2011. I don't know if you see here. So now it's like outdated, but they updated it for like new stuff. But you see that new media literacies are important to have, but also social, emotional. And you see like what are the most important skills that people need, as we call it, like the 21st century skills. Did I talk about those 3 books at any point? I don't remember if I ever mentioned those. So I'll just go fast. Those are now becoming a little bit old, but I think they still, unfortunately, accurate, describing what happens. So Howard Gardner is the person who coined multiple intelligence in 83 or 84. And he did a research in 2000, I would say 11 or 13, with then Katie Davis, his PhD student, interviewing youth on their digital use. And what they found was that they call it the app generation. Young people are suffering from 3 main issues. One is their identity. They're struggling with their identity. They're struggling with intimacy, like intimate relationship with other people, and imagination. And they're putting a lot of emphasis on the use of digital media to it. That because of the way that our lives are and the use and the dependence on digital media, there is a lack of imagination, practice of intimacy, and an option to really explore your identity in a free way. So that's that. Then to make it worse, there is Rashkov, who coined the term viral video or viral media, and wrote the book Program or Be Programmed. So he's one of the big like scholars currently of media literacy. He explains that we live in a present state of shock. Like, how many of you in the last hour that we've been discussing have been texting or liking or answering something either on your computer or on your device? I think I mentioned it, but I don't know if I mentioned to your class. There is a research several years ago show that middle schoolers feel rejected if they don't get an answer to a text message or a post, if it's under 30 seconds to 10 seconds. So something between 8 seconds to 30 seconds, if you don't answer with something, they feel rejected. People are usually shocked by this statistics, but then I usually explains as parents, if you text your kid in the middle of the night when they're out and you're waiting for an answer, if they're not answering you after 30 seconds, are you starting to be worried? And they're like, yeah, well, okay. So it's easy to say, yeah, the kids and blah, blah, but also adults have the same attention issues. And if somebody posts, okay, thank you, Midwa. If somebody is texting a picture of them on Instagram, and do you feel forced to say something about it? Like even just thumbs up or like a heart or something. You don't need to write, but do you feel forced that you need to do that and on a regular basis? So the problem that Rashkov is talking about is that the business model of social media especially is to keep us engaged, and we're all the time like that we need all the time to be on it. I listened to there's an amazing book now that I'm gonna read. I heard an hour lecture of the author Johan Hari. It's called Stolen Focus. It's amazing. So it talks exactly about that, but also provides some solutions of what to do to take control over media. So in a way, Francia, media education nowadays is a lot about well-being and about taking control back on our lives and have a thoughtful use of media. And then the third one is Sherry Turkle, who was a very early adoptive. She's in MIT. And she calls reclaiming conversation because she says that when we're going to a date and we're bringing our phone and we're putting our phone on the table, what we're communicating to our date is that it's very nice to sit with you and talk to you, but if I have a call from my best girlfriend or my friend or my parents, it's more important than you, and I'm going to answer that, or a text message. So just think about it. Like, what do you communicate and how are you really looking into the other person's eye? Like, when we're talking about issues of intimacy, like, are we used to actually looking into each other's eye, especially now after 2.5 years of pandemic? Like, do we even know how to socialize? Like, suddenly social interaction are awkward and kind of weird. Like, do you shake a hand? You don't shake a hand? Like, do you talk close to the person, not close to the person? Like, all those things got totally interrupted. And like, it was not very good before pandemic, but the pandemic like really plunged this kind of like social interaction. So what can be done? So Daniel Goleman, who wrote about social intelligence and emotional intelligence, and Peter Senge, who wrote about systematic thinking, wrote this book in 2013, The Triple Focus. And what they said is that basically, and the same book that I want to read now, Stolen Focus, says the same thing, is that focus is the most important factor for leadership and for success nowadays. Like, our focus is so disrupted with everything that if we're able to really focus, that's and so Goleman and Senge focused on 3 elements that they said you need to know how to focus, which is super interesting. So the first one is self-reflection, inner. Like, what is your ability to have an inner kind of reflection to it? So that's, are you using too much of your phone? Should you turn off your phone? Should you, now say, okay, that's too much for me. I need to go. I need, like, what are the levels of engagement and feeling safe and feeling that, this is something I can handle. So that's the inner one. Is that clear? Okay. The second one is empathy, which is, my area of research. And that's, can you focus on the other person? Like, can you really understand the person you're now interacting with? What's going on with them? Like, do you have the ability to really understand, okay, what's going on now? So understand what's going on with yourself right now, but also understand what's going on with the other person and the interaction between the 2 of you, or the 3 of you, or the 4, as a group, like the people you're like in this specific communication with now. Are we good on that focus? The third one is the systems. Can you understand how system works? Like, why is this happening? It's because there is this policy. Those people are in power. Remember all the power cube that we worked on? Do you have the conceptual understanding that I feel this way, I see that you and I have this relationship right now, but we're also part of the system that put us in this place that way. And that's why it works the way it works right now. So those are the three areas of focus. And if you think about, I love to say, when you think about creating a story, so Francie, especially with you, you always think about the hero, and then the people that the hero work with, and then the community or the world that the hero works in. So it's almost the same thing in that sense, right? When you create a story, you need to think about all those three levels as well. So it's kind of meta in a way, but it's very helpful to think about. Okay, and I'll get back. You'll see how everything connects. Okay, so I wrote a long time ago, it's like 5 years ago, this article called The Media Production Hive and How to Use Education for Differentiated Instruction. So that's what, what Jordan was asking. So this article I can send you as a PDF if you want to, but it helps to theoretically understanding and practically how to do it. So that's one of the research that I made that explains it. I'm using human-centered design. Have you learned on that in experience design? You're supposed to learn human-centered design, so that should be familiar to you. How to empathize with your target audience, define what is the thing you do, you ideate, you prototype, and then you test it. So that should be familiar for you. So I'm not gonna, put too much emphasis on this. Then I don't know how much you're I don't know how much you're familiar with executive functioning. This is a special education and brain injury kind of research that shows that to be able to successfully complete an assignment, which media production is an assignment if you think about it that way, you need to have all those skills. So you need to know how to monitor, organize material, plan, organize, working memory, how to initiate. You need to have emotional control, how to shift from one emotion to another, and to inhibit if there is some kind of behavior that will disrupt the work that you're going to do. So this is helpful for special educators to know if a student that have either behavioral issues or cognition issues, to know how to help them. But I found it super helpful, especially with my background as a special educator, that when you're working on a production and you're working with people, a lot of the time, even people that won't be part of special education might have some deficits here and might have issues with either, especially kids, with emotional regulation. But there's sometimes, like I have ADHD, right? But I was diagnosed only 2 years ago. So you might have people who are not being diagnosed that, might have issues with working memories or might have issues with their organizing stuff. So understanding those skills are also important as part of what you're going, because it's something that you're going to have challenges with that you might not know. And the person who has those challenges might not identify that those are challenges that they have because nobody talked to them about it. Like, they didn't, go to screening. You're not a evaluator. You're not going to evaluate their, emotional skills and stuff, but understanding the sensitivity that can really have an issue, it's important, and you'll see how I'm putting all of it together. Okay? This is for educators, and again, I don't know how much you're familiar with this, but it's very known. This is the Bloom taxonomy. So the Bloom taxonomy was in 1954. Bloom was ahead of a committee that created 3 small books about cognitive domain, affective domain, and kinesthetic domains that he basically rated what should be learning outcomes of education. And people know only the cognitive domain, which is really sad that they're totally ignoring the affective domain. But when you see in classes, especially undergrad, the learning outcome, you see those basically verbs like students will apply, students will synthesize, students will analyze, and a lot of people are talking about the Bloom taxonomy. It's been updated and stuff, but it goes back to 56, not 54, 56, where they came up with this. And there's a hierarchy that he says that, you know, knowledge is the lowest one, like memorizing something or remembering. But to be able to evaluate is the highest one of a cognitive domain. So there is here a hierarchy of like those. But it's interesting if you look at the affective domain, what they came up with, which again, nobody's talking about. Like, you know, how to organize, valuing, responding, receiving, and putting values. So a more updated version of the cognitive domain put a little bit, you know, remembering instead of knowledge, and creating in the highest. And evaluating is almost the highest, but actually creating is the highest cognitive domain. So that's interesting to think about that. And then they added communication, that people need communication all along. So it's not separate, it's like basically the, I don't know, the atmosphere where this thing is like floating. And then for the social emotional, we have Castle here in Chicago that came up with the 5 social and emotional learning, which is self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, and self-management. So that's the newer version, basically, of those cognitive domains. Okay. And additionally, we have my mentor, Renee, that in 2010, she created the ACRA model that talks about digital and media literacy, that you need to have 5 competency: how to access information, how to analyze and evaluate information, how to create media messages, how to reflect on your media use, and how to act in a social and responsible way. And the law in Illinois that was passed last year used those 5 key concepts to explain that's media literacy. That's what media literacy are the outcome of the media education process. By going through media education, you're becoming media literate. And there is more models of another of my professor, Julie Corro, who came up with the personal digital inquiry, again talking about analysis and reflection, wondering and discovering, collaborating, discussing, and creating and taking action. So you see the inspiration one with the other. So this is a lot of theory that I'm going very quick, but you'll understand where all of that comes back into this model. Okay? So I'm going to pause here because I talked for quite a while. Any questions on the theory, where I'm coming from when I'm coming to teach media production? And now I'll explain what actually is going to happen and how it works. But any things that were weird or you didn't understand, or kind of concept or names or, you know, theory that, like, how is that connected?
I don't have a question on the content, but I'm just curious if you could share the PowerPoint with all the resources and links and everything.
Yep. And I'll also give you different handouts that are not the PowerPoint, but things that you can use as handouts to give it to the people you're working with. So I'll follow up either today or tomorrow and give to you. Okay, so when we're talking about the triple focus in production, what are we talking about? So if we talk about the system thinking, remember the power cube? We're talking about who are the producers, who are the connections, what is the civic engagement here that is going to be, because everything is related to civic engagement. You remember, I'm civic media, so I'm not talking just about, and it's related to everything that you're going to do. When we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about teamwork, communication, and empathy. And when we're talking about the personal skills, do they have media literacy skills? Do they have the executive functioning, the ability to actually like successfully do the task? And do they have the confidence and the perseverance? Remember, that goes back to what you said as your strength, right? If you don't have that, that's not going to happen, right? So that's how those things are connected together. If you want your learners to be able to produce the media, they need to have all of those focus on the personal skills the collaboration, and the system thinking at the same time. Now, the problem is they might have some of those skills ahead of time, but they need to learn those skills in your workshop, right? And that's why I spend more than an hour to give you all the like background. And now I'm going to give you the actual curriculum. So you don't need to explain to your learners everything that I explained to you. This was more for you to understand the whole background of what's the process and the logical way of understanding how I got to where I got. But now I'm going to share with you the actual like steps and what does that mean. So we're going to get more practical right now. So any questions before I move on? Okay. So I did it with you, so you know this exercise with the duck, right? And you know the whole point that like there is like, I don't remember, 4 million options or something like that. And the idea is that unlike here, this is part of the issue in the educational system, that everybody is standardized. So to Jordan's point that people have different skills, that's exactly what we need to think about as collaborating. Because if we think that everybody's in the same, they're not. Like we cannot ask a fish or an elephant or a penguin to climb a tree, right? And to be like in the same standard. So that's where the duck exercise kind of is a good entry level to explain, okay, everybody's different and acknowledge the differences. So that's just the beginning. So now I'm going to start with my model and I'm going to go very slowly. So, you know, stop me at any point and ask me questions. So the first step is access. It's media production. If you don't have access to media, there might be production, but not of media, right? So if you want to do a video, there needs to be access to cameras. Now, it doesn't need to be DSLR. It can be your phone or their phone, you know. But there needs to be some kind of camera. Like they won't be able to capture video if they don't have camera to capture video, right? They need a pencil and paper to write something if they need to write something. So whatever is the form you want them to do, you need to have the equipment. So I think in that sense, you have the equipment, right? And if not, we can discuss and see how the college can help you with that. But equipment-wise, there should be accessibility. But accessibility, physical accessibility, is not accessibility of experience. So this stage, it's a stage where they need to work on two things. One is analyze examples, and that's why I ask you for inspiration. You share with them your inspiration and you analyze it with them. And you see what they think. You have them bring their own inspiration, what they want to do. And then you analyze together. And maybe with your analysis, they're like, oh, I didn't see that aspect. Oh, I didn't think about this. Like, oh, I see now. Yeah, maybe that's not a good idea. Oh, and this is brilliant. I want to do like this, you know. So it's important to show always examples, right? You always ask me to provide you examples to understand like good example and bad example of what I mean with this assignment. So that's the analysis. But what needs to happen at the same time is exploration. You need to give them time to use the equipment and make mistakes and practice with it. So I'm going to get now to the big aha for me that happened to me in the classroom on the first year I was teaching. I was out of film school and I was 23 years old. I was like thrown for 40 hours a week into very tough like classes. And I was like, okay, no problem. I mean, I did 4 years of film school. I know how to make a movie and stuff. I'll just teach them how to do it. But the problem is in film school, I was taught to become a filmmaker, not to become an educator. And if you think about it, Spielberg or, you know, whatever, Fellini, or take whoever you want to take as like, you know, directors, they don't need to learn the stuff. They learn it, they know, they do experiments. So Spielberg loved to do experiments with lights. So he's doing some experiments with light, and then he incorporated like in his movies. But when you're working with people who didn't go to film school, that this is one of their first encounter, they don't have this knowledge. So everything you learn in film school doesn't help you, right? Because it doesn't teach how to teach. So the first thing that happens, which is very different than film school, is explore. Give them the camera, go nuts. Like, don't ruin the camera, but try different angles. See why you don't like film when the sun is in your face, because then everything will be burned kind of it. But they need to explore that to see that it happens. They need to gain that experience to feel confident about it. So I'm talking about video a lot because that's where I'm coming from, but it's the same with writing. Like, there's no way you're going to write your first poem and it's going to be an amazing, poem. Like, you need to practice those things to know that this won't work, that this combination, that this punctuation, that, same thing with colors, same thing with music. Like, yeah, I've never played the guitar. You're going to give me a guitar and I'm going to be, I don't know, whoever, Eric Clapton, John Bon Jovi, or, like, there's no way, right? I need to explore. I need to play with it. So any tool that you choose to use, you need to give them time to analyze exemplary showcase. At the same time, also practice it. So Kara, especially for you, you need to put time, either the first week, first several times, that we call it DG Playground. So it's basically kind of just go and explore. Obviously control that they not ruin the equipment, but they can just experiment. Playing with a mixer, you have so many buttons on a mixer, who knows what every button does. So you need to explore and see, oh, that's what happens when I do with this. So there is a gain of confidence. I don't know, Francie, how much time you have in your workshop to give that. And Midwa, for your specific project here, you won't have time because the people are doing it already and they're just doing the podcast. But this is something that can be helpful in other workshops that you're giving.
Yeah, and that reminds me of like Media does the same concept. So they call it like geeking out, where like the teens just explore the equipment on their own before actually getting to learn. So yeah, I can relate to this model.
Yeah. So, but you see that I structure it with the 3 focus. So the personal skill is access skills, which is not just physical access. It's just also like, do I understand how to make it? Do I understand how to work with it? The collaboration is on analysis, because if you do analysis by yourself, you're into your own biases. Only when you do it with other people, it really opens up your mind. And a lot of the time, as you know, what you will see is different than what I will see. And if we're discussing that, suddenly I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't see. I watched this movie like 20 times. I've never seen that thing that you just pointed out. So it's important that the analysis is done in collaboration, so that it really opens up the mind to understand that the empathy part, that other people interpret messages differently. And then there is an interesting dialogue about it. And that the system is the exploration. That's the name of this stage. So there's going to be 7 stages. The first one is to explore, because you don't know anything. Not you specifically, the people you're going to work with. And that's the time for them to gain more confidence. Okay? So that's stage number 1. Does that make sense? Any questions about this stage? Okay. So, for example, what I love to do is to do, again, Lego, I know, is to do stop motion animation, which is very, very, with Stop Motion Studio, it's very easy. So I usually bring like Lego, and then people are creating like a 10-second video movie, but it's like gorgeous, and they're so excited about it. And it takes like an hour to know how to do it, and they feel like, whoa, I made like a stop motion animation video. That's like amazing, and it's so easy. Now I know how to do it. So that's like, again, this is just one technique out of many that you can use. Here's like an example how it can look like.
Come here, boy. Want to do a trick? Good boy.
Can you hear it?
Greetings, folks. I'm Waddle from Channel Watch Waddle and Screwy Forest Cartoons. Over the years, we have used several different incarnations to animate, from VHS recorders to the present-day using of animation apps. For almost a year now, we've been using Stop Motion Studio, which is not only a lot of fun to use, but gives us the ability of animating right on our handheld device. Before beginning filming, we write a script and then storyboard like so. Here are some cutouts of our new character Radio Shack. We make various poses, facial expressions, to determine what his character will need for the performance. Next, we design our backgrounds. We also take this time to work out our lighting, which we'll be using during filming. After organizing all the cutouts and getting your ducks in a row, no pun intended, we are ready to happily film. Here's how we shoot each frame. Shot by shot, you move your character, so when you stream it, your character will move across the screen. After we complete filming, we watch it over and then go into the editing aspect of the app. You can delete or add frames, or one trick you could do is extend frames, giving a particular shot a little extra time. When you feel your film looks how you want, now it's time to add the audio. This is the audio accessories. Watch as we put this little extra sound to Radio Shack's jump. As you have completed your project, now's your chance to go back and tweak what you need. Then you could upload your movie, whether to YouTube, email, or save it right on your device to show anyone anytime you'd like. Now, let's see that scene again, shall we? Stop Motion Studio can be acquired here at cateater.com along with many other creative
So you get the
apps.
point. Another thing is I'm using what we're doing in the Media Education Lab, which is the 5 questions, or kind of asking those. I don't know if you've ever... Did we go over that at any point? Yeah, should.
I don't think so.
Okay, so remind me. I have tons of those. So that's for analyzing. Those are like the main media literacy questions, like what techniques were used, what was the purpose of the message, how might different people interpret the message differently, what was omitted from the message, those kind of questions. And it can be on any type of media. You have here all the type that you can see of different media. And you can do checklist of, if people know and have access to the equipment. So those are kind of like the ways to go over it. I don't know if you want me to go over this, but I created rubrics to explain and to evaluate if the people in your work were able to actually do the stuff. So access, what does that mean? It's examine various options of equipment, software, style, and structure to become confident with the creative and strategic choices. So are they familiar with the procedures, sequences, security standards of the tools, equipment, and software? Did they gain confidence using the tools? Do they know how to troubleshoot problems? And then if we talk about analyze as social deliberation, do they know how to observe, analyze, exchange professional examples? So do they know how to identify author, genre, purpose? Do they know how to describe the value and constructs? Do they know how to compare and contrast the form of content of the stuff? So this is basically the evaluation. This is if we're talking about indicator, remember, to know if there is an impact, if there is a success. That's how you know if they gained those skills or they didn't. And it's very easy because they either didn't, so no, they did somewhat, that would be a 1, or they totally, and that's a 2. So it's either a 0, 1, or 2. That's it. That's how you grade it. Pretty easy to kind of like, making it easy and not too complicated to evaluate. So any question about this rubrics?
I guess just like, do we grade it like after, like how do you apply it?
So remember,
or do you ask them to grade themselves?
You can. Never thought about that. But usually I'm talking to K-12 educators. And so most of the time, this is part of like they need to give a grade to the students in the classroom. So that's like an easy way to show them how they can grade their students.
Okay.
In your case, you don't need to. This is like out of school. But for yourself, that can be helpful to know if you should move to the next stage or not.
Got it. Okay.
So you don't need to actually like grade your students, but if you go over it and you think about the people in your workshop or the last session that you had, you're like, did we actually accomplish that or not? And if you feel not really, so you go back and, work on that a little bit more. It's a good question. And this is obviously the creative control here is only about access at this point. We'll see that it changes in each one of the stages. But this is where you negotiate like who has more control over access. They'll want more control, you'll want more control, and kind of finding the way to make it work. Okay, so that was stage number 1. Stage number 2, synthesize. So you analyze great examples, but you analyze examples of Hollywood movies and you don't have a Hollywood budget, right? Tom Cruise is not like one of your producers. So you explore the tools and you know what you're capable of and you know what the examples are. Now you synthesize those two things. So between the realities of what you do have accessibility to and examples of how it looks good and how you want it to look like, you figure out a compromise into kind of like, okay, how can I combine those two things? What can I actually do now? And you start thinking about the thing that you want to do. And then you brainstorm. Brainstorm, you cannot do it by yourself because the idea of real brainstorm originally is people are throwing ideas without judgment. So it's not like somebody says an idea and the other is like, yeah, no, I'm not sure. No, there's no judgment. It's like me, Dwight, throwing an idea, then Francia is throwing an idea, then Kira is throwing an idea, and then I throwing an idea. And as we throw ideas, we build up on each other. And at the end, we're kind of like, okay, this is all the stuff we got. What do we do with it now? So that's real, genuine brainstorming. And so this is called ideation. If you remember from design thinking, so this is where you put your ideation that is a synthesis and a brainstorming between the examples that you had, the exploratory part, but now you're like, okay, what are we going to actually do? So how do we do that? I'm sure you know this, the empathy map. So that's a marketing tool, but it's very efficient to kind of empathize with your target audience and understanding what they're going to do. You do participatory action research at this point and figuring out like what the community wants, what is it like, and pulling it all together to kind of like, okay, that's what we have. So that's usually helpful to get some ideas. And there's different brainstorming tactics as well. So here you look at like relevancy, like how people can take different ideas and see what's feasible. Is it aligned with purpose? This is super important because we're talking about civic media. My examples to educators, especially middle schoolers, is that kids for the last 10 years always want to do a movie about creepy clowns and horror movies. Now, awesome, but that's usually not aligned with the values of what they want to share. They're saying, I want to support the community to do something about sustainability. So how the heck is a creepy clown gonna... You might be able to connect it, but that's where you need to be careful that people are not being hijacked by shiny kind of like idea that disalign them from the purpose of the project. So you're basically the Debbie Downer, the kind of like gatekeeper of like saying, wait a second. We were talking that this was the civic engagement project. So how is this brilliant idea connected with the civic engagement that you're talking? Fine changing it to like a different civic media engagement, but make sure that this goal stays. And if this stage you're not keeping that, That's it. You lost it. Like, it's not going to come back because it's going to be too late in the editing room to suddenly like bring it back. So this is where you need to be very vigilant about, like, this is the purpose and this is what we want to do, and that's the alignment between the purpose and the format, the concept that of what we want to do. So you need all the time to bring it back. This is really annoying as like an I did it all the time, and the people who are working, they feeling like you're kind of censoring their creativity, but you need to explain to them, let's just think creatively. That's a brainstorming session of like, let's combine them, but I want you to remember that's why we're doing it. Like, yes, it's fun and everything, but there is like a civic engagement reason why we're doing that. We do want to change the world. We want to make a change, you know, social change, and we're using media, but let's use media thoughtfully. Does that make sense? And again, evaluating your own like purpose and message and where you are in. And then the brainstorming is the empathy part of, do you recognize the target audience? Do you understand your own biases and the other people and be able to exchange ideas? Can you predict the impact that your media will have on the target audience? And that's a big one, because sometimes, and as we know, a lot of the time in Hollywood, they screw up with that as well, right? They think this movie will be a hit and it's a huge flop, or the other way, they think it's a low budget movie, nobody will care, and it becomes the greatest hit for the next 10 years. So it's not like perfect, but at least to practice the fact at this point, early on, think about the target audience. And if you think about it deeply, this is a huge civic engagement practice, right? To think about your impact and think about your target audience and think about what's your goal and how you're actually going to get it from the beginning. So this is crucial. Every stage is important, but this, you can see that this set up the way you're going to go with it. And so it depends, I'm thinking, Kara and Francia, because you don't have many times with your like people that you're teaching. They might be in different levels. You might want to jump to this stage for like already. So it depends where they are. If they have already enough experience, you might want to skip, but you need to be careful if you skip a stage or you consolidating stages, because there is 7 stages. So I'm not sure you have 7 meetings. Francia, you said 3 meetings or 2 meetings, right? It's like, so it's, you need to think like how you do it like very quickly. All of that together. Any questions about those like rubric, evaluation, indicators? Okay. So here we're talking about content. Here the struggle is about content. Like, who has control over content, and do they understand the connection with where they want to get, like the goal of the project that they want to do. Okay, the next one is to initiate. Okay, we have the idea now. We're all set up. We agree on the idea. Now, what am I going to do? Like, I'm gonna be the camera person, or I'm gonna be the editor, I'm gonna be the writer, I'm gonna be the recorder, I'm gonna be the musician, you know. So people need to initiate, to show that they have the responsibility and they want to take that responsibility. Negotiate. Francia and I both wants to be directors. So Midwa, what do you do? Because you're the instructor, we're starting to fight over that. And like, how do you? So sometimes what I do is say, you know, those 2 shots, you'll be the director, and then you'll switch and stuff and figuring it out. Or maybe at some point I see that it's not so much important for me to be a director. So Francia, you can be the director, I'll be the camera. That's fine. I'm okay with that. So, but it's part of human negotiation. And if you remember what I said, this intimacy of like relationship and understanding compromise, this is a skill that a lot of people don't have. And as I said, the pandemic really damaged that. So it's not fun, but it's a skills that can develop and can be helpful, because that will help people collaborate together. So it's, again, very important to have that. And so if we had exploration, we had ideation, now we're doing the actual planning. So this could look at as the pre-production process, the traditional pre-production process of we're doing all the planning, the scheduling, the responsibilities, the, you know, how things, each one of us, what are we going to do and what are we in charge of. So very easily, you just do a list of responsibility. You have a written contract, which can look like this. This is what I'm doing. This is how we're going to do it. As easy as is, like this. Don't complicate it. But once it's written on paper, people in a way kind of written in the contract. So that gives like the responsibility and understanding that, okay, so you're going to be the camera person, and then people will act from their professional role. As a camera person, I did research about the light and stuff, and I can tell you, no, but I'm the director and I wanted this light, but I understand now that you're saying that, you know, so the discussion is not on the personal level, it's on the professional level, and that makes easier if there's any tension about it. And the discussion is not, I like it, I don't like it, and like, it's more about like, what does that mean professionally? And respect each one of the professional roles. Okay, so are you taking responsibility? Can you plan your part? Do you demonstrate competency of your expertise? Right? Did you do research on the expert? Do you listen to all this music to be the composer? Do you know the, like, so that your arguments are professional and not just I like it? You know, that's not a good argument. And then the negotiation is the compromise. Can you also offer a suggestion that aligns with your role? Like, can we figure out like a way? Can you take like the things that each one responsibility and put like a coherent plan that we see how each one is built on the other person's work that they're doing? And a schedule on your part and the team's part, so that it's very, very clear what each one is doing. And if somebody is not doing their role, it's clear that they screw up, and then figuring out what we can do. Either they make up for it or somebody else is stepping in. And again, this is not ideal. Like, there's no way it's going to work 100%, like, you know. But at least the expectation and the communication is clear. That's what I'm trying to show, that it's super important to have that. And now we move... and here is format and content that is kind of, again, negotiated with the students. So now each one create their own part, right? So like in an orchestra, each one of the instruments is doing their own part, but it all comes together. So individually you create your part, but this is part of a larger collaboration that needs to work together. And a lot of the time, people like, especially in video, they like to direct. So everybody's a director, the actors, the cinematographer, the producer. And so people need to know their place, and they need to understand that it's a collaborative work. And so your suggestion idea might be good, but you need to understand that it might not work very well. Like, and it's, you know, and somebody needs to make a decision on their expertise. So again, I'm giving video, but you know, when you do a website design, like only one person can be on the computer, right? Or you can decide that you do this page, you do this page. Or if you do a story, so you do this part of the story, you do this part of the story, but it needs to connect. Like if you write in a one style and then the second part is a whole total style, it's kind of like, what's going on? There are those kind of books that do that, but still there needs to be some kind of coherency into like how the flow works. So this is the production part of it, which a lot of the time for young people, Kira, just to for you to know, this is where a lot of the time things are falling apart. Because the plan, I think I told you about the Woody Allen quote that the best part of making a movie is finishing the script, because it's amazing and ideal. And then after that, as a director, the role is just to keep it as close to this ideal, but knowing that everything is falling apart and just trying to put it together, kind of. So the problem is that until here, everything was ideal in the head. It was like the planning. It was like, it's going to look like this, creepy clowns, explosions and stuff. And then you come to the production and it's low budget and it's, you know, and it, I don't know if you've seen, there's a lot of those kind of thing of like, that's how we wanted, that's how we actually look like. There is all those memes of like comparing. I have tons of those in youth media. It's like a thing.
Yeah. It's like how it was versus how it's going.
Yes.
I've seen such kind of memes, yeah.
And that's why a lot of the time production collapse, because people are super frustrated and depressed, because it's like, what? It looks crappy. That's not even close to what I imagined. This is horrible. And so they still need, and that's part of the deal of working on it, understanding that yes, it's not gonna look as they wanted, but it can still have the effect that they planned on with less resources that they thought they would have. So it's not gonna be the best story they ever had. It's not gonna be the best music they ever did, but you know, it's part of the practice. And I'm using something from second grade. It's called Grow and Glow. I learned it from a second grader, but it's actually working. It's like grow is an improvement, a suggestion, and glow is a praise. As you work with the other people, can you look about self-improvement for yourself, but also acknowledge your personal achievement? So not just saying, oh, I suck at this and I need to make it better, but also saying, well, I actually did great in this. So kind of balance it. And when I'm talking to my peers, I'm not talking, oh, you are horrible at da na 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 na, because then that's not really saying, as a team, we have a challenge here. This didn't work really in our but at the same time, we had the success as a team. So like balancing it. And then thinking about the procedure, because there's also things that procedure-wise are not working, but are working. So again, the system thinking. So this is labeled again as the inner, other, and outer. Remember the three focus areas. So when you give feedback to yourself, to the other person, or to the whole process, always balance it with grow and glow. I think that's kind of, you know, second grade, but actually very helpful. Okay, and here again, were you able to compose your part, to follow your plan, to show your expertise, to solve problems, because it didn't work the way you planned for sure. Were you able to problem solve? And then as you collaborate, were you able to communicate your part, to adjust your part after you receive feedback, and to apply other works to your own part? Again, very tricky, but that's part of like the process there. And again, it's content and format at this point that you're negotiating. And then we're moving to modifying. Okay, so you did the production itself, you wrote your essay, you created your website, you compose your song, you colored your mural. Every time it needs to be modified. It's not like once you did it, it's not like it's done. And that's part that is super depressing, because it's not the way you wanted it to look like. You had in your mind, in your mind you had unlimited budget, but reality, no, it's not exactly like that. So there's always this depression once you finished with the production to like, that's what I did? Like, that's really not even close to what I imagined. And so how do you work on this motivation and to kind of modifying it and feeling that, okay, I can still make it, work? Monitoring is monitoring somebody else. Like, how do you monitor somebody else and give them feedback in a way that is not disruptive? Like, your editing is horrible. What kind of editing is that? Like, who wants to work with somebody who says this kind of sentences, right? Like, get out of this room. Like, I don't want to hear you. So how do you monitor that the others are doing their part and it comes together in a way that is collaborative, which is, again, very, very difficult. And then how do you edit it eventually that everything comes together? And this is the post-production part, right? So I love to use Screencastify or VideoAnt, and we have Studio and now Panopto to put comments on videos. Have you done that? I'm sure in my class you did that. That there is a video and you put comments, or I did it only with undergrad?
I don't think we've done it in class, but I do this with work. Like, there's, I forget which platform it is that people upload videos and you can put comments.
Okay. Can't believe that I didn't torture you with that. Okay. Note to myself. So you put so it can be even a song that you're putting, doesn't need to be a video, but then the comments are helpful at that point, because if you just say, oh, this is awesome, or this sucks, it's not helpful. Like, okay, so what? Great. I cannot do anything. But if you're very specific, at this moment, I felt like the volume was too low. The pitch is too high. I'm like, the colors are not clear. Like, if you're very specific into this experience and what's the problem, it's easier for me to think about the solution. And better if you actually offer a solution for it. So, can you manipulate the draft to the target audience? Do you recognize, again, what was the purpose and how can you put it in the purpose? Can you develop like all this work together and put it, basically editing, right? Reorganizing it. But again, thinking about like the purpose. And monitoring is suggest alternative, estimate like how it aligns or not. Can you revise the draft? Can you work on it? This is something that is super helpful for getting into putting it together, because again, this is part that is very depressing for people to see where they're at. And again, it's content and format. Before that, okay, I don't know why I don't have it here. I need to find it. So what happens here is a process that you need to think about it as grief. Now, I don't know if you know the 5 stages of grief. Have you heard about it? You know, there is like shock, and then there is anger, and there's, at the end, there is kind of like acceptance. And it's been shown that it's pretty accurate. It's not, again, scientifically like everything, but it's, if you think about this process at this point after the production, when you're getting into editing, that you're grieving the ideal thing you had in your mind, and that you need to accept it, although you're angry and frustrated and it's unfair that, you know, this person's screwed up. It doesn't matter. Eventually, that's what happens. It's not the song, the movie, the website, the presentation, the story that you wanted to have, but this is what you have. So accept and move on. But it takes a process. And if you try to rush those things, people will start kind of alienate themselves. And Kara, in your case, you'll have less and less engagement if you don't give people the time to grieve that and explain to them, yes, that's what happens. Even to the greatest filmmakers, it happens. Like, there's not perfect, like, so Francie, in your case, it might be difficult because you have only one workshop. But if you acknowledge that and, you know, at some point and say, we're not looking for perfection. Like, don't think that, you know, kind of lower the expectation for people themselves, and coming from you as the instructor, explaining this is part of the process, it might be accepted a little bit easier, and people will be more compassionate to themselves. And setting the expectation. But again, you don't need to talk to them about grief, because different people look at grief from different aspects, and people might be offended from this analogy. But for you as an instructor, you need to understand that process. That people might be frustrating or might have some, you know, anger. It's not about you. It's about this grief process of the product, that they're very disappointed. So it's kind of weird talking about it because it's not a person, but it is a part of you that you imagine and thought and had. And it might be like, you know, maybe only 5 minutes you imagine this perfect thing and then you start writing. So, and maybe you thought about several years, but this is something that is very powerful, and you need to acknowledge that as part of the creative process. So I guess it does make sense in a way. In a weird way. Okay. Almost last one. So now you engage. So you finish the thing, but what happens a lot of the time is in media education, there's a tendency to, again, industry-wise, to look at once the product is done, we're done. But if we think about civic engagement, that's wrong. Because if you don't engage with your target audience, there's no civic engagement there. So you did your product, awesome, but you didn't interact with your target audience, so what's the point, right? If you want to drive social change, you need to actually engage with your audience. So that's the personal engagement with people. If it's in a screening, if it's in, on social media, but engaging with the target audience that is consuming what you just did. And Francia, I don't know if you incorporated that in your storytelling. I don't think so. I think you had the first meeting doing that, the second meeting doing the photo, but is there maybe a third option, can be optional about engaging? Maybe it can be online, doesn't need to be, but thinking about the engagement.
I think part of the plan, even though it's not confirmed, is that we'll be like presenting the final product and like unveiling it at their annual like soiree event at the farm. So
Perfect.
like their gala event.
Wow, but that's perfect. That's exactly it. Awesome. Okay, great. And Midwa, that's also inviting the people who are doing the podcast to see once it's on, like, engaging, sharing on social media, and kind of seeing how people react to it, so that they feel they engage. It's not just something they did and they forgot about it. And then there is the reflection, which, I'm going to go fast. We talked about it so many times in classes, but the reflection is with somebody. You don't reflect just with yourself. You engage like from your own perspective, but you reflect with other people. And then obviously you do some kind of type of showcase. And again, can be asynchronous, can be synchronous, can be online, can be in person, but it's really important to engage. And so we talked in class about the differences between reflection and feedback, right? That there is a huge difference between the two of them. Feedback is to improve something. It's to give you concrete stages of something. But reflection is just, it's for your own knowledge, kind of like, insights. And so I told you the whole story. I'm just going to go over just quickly. I used the sandwich feedback, which was horrible. I thought it was great. There is the praise, the criticism, the praise, but everybody was just looking at the criticism, and it totally collapsed and it didn't work. And so I was trying to look for a different version. And I mean, you see, this is a valid way that people understand sandwich feedback, and that's why sandwich feedback doesn't work. Because they know you're sugarcoating it, right? So that's why it's not useful. So I did this initially. That worked pretty well. But then over the years, I modified the empathic feedback that is from your own personal, place to more structured. First, like noting what I saw, then asking like a question about it, then praising, and then eventually offering some suggestion from your own perspective. So we've practiced that, so I don't know if there's any question, but you've seen it several times. So here when we're talking about the showcase is, can you provide evidence of the impact? Can you see like what was your responsibility, how the target audience answer for it? And then if you talk about reflection is, can you show what you wanted to do, the juxtaposition of what you wanted to do with what actually happened? Like one of my, I love to give that examples that I was working with kids and they did a horror movie, and then somebody gave them a praise, said, "Oh, I love your movie. It was so funny. The music was hilarious." And they're like, "What? It's supposed to be a horror movie." But it was helpful for them because somebody came from a positive way. They enjoyed it, but they understood that they did a crappy job of making it like horror movie frightening because the music choices and the way that they're acting in it. So that was a valid reflection for them to learn for next time, to understand how their production didn't work with what the purpose was. Again, it's part of the accountability and the reflection, right? And recommend alternative for the next time. So this is mainly distribution, like looking at how the distribution works. And so the last part of it is really the civic action that comes from it, like, you know, the further, the intermediate and the long-term impact. So again, if this is civic media, our video, so we know what civic media is, but this is the model. And there is a reason why I'm sharing it only at the end, because if you think that if 2 hours ago I would show you this and telling you that's what you need to do, you were like, what the heck is this? Like all those colors and all those things. Now you understand the pattern. And again, it can be reciprocal. You can keep doing it, right? But I think it makes more sense that way. That you understand that you need to explore, ideate, plan, produce, edit, showcase that will bring to civic action. But those are the processes. But on the personal level, you understand that the students need to have access, ability to synthesize, to initiate, to create, modify, and then engage. And on the community level, empathy level, they need to know how to analyze together, socially deliberate, to brainstorm, to negotiate, to collaborate, to monitor each other, and to reflect on each other's work. So the idea here is that you have those like personal skills that are building on the collaborative skills, that are building on the processes and system thinking into this like hopefully coherent framework that should be practical when you're going. And again, this can be done in an hour. It can be done in like a year. Like you decide how much emphasis you put on it. But if you think about how to teach, that's what this model is about. Because usually what we have models is how to produce media, but not how to teach media. Right? So that's what I was trying to do. And that's the work that I've been doing into conceptualizing, like, if you want to teach how to produce media to people who've never produced media before, those are the stages with those different skills between the personal skills, the collaborative skills, and the process skills that will get you into a civic action purpose, if that's what you're interested in. So I crammed a lot of stuff into 2 hours, and you understand better why I needed an hour or so to explain how to get there, and all the inspiration between special education and design thinking and media literacy and digital personal learning inquiry and all of that, to kind of put those things together and where it comes from and how you need to explain to the people who you're working with your motivation and where you're coming from, so that you set those things as a collaborative work. Okay, so I'm gonna stop now and open up for questions.